Hello everybody, my name is Mariako, and today I'm going to tell you everything you need to know about the upcoming update for Minecraft. This is Minecraft 1.16, and this applies to both Java and Bedrock versions of the game, which are sharing a version number for the first time, and will supposedly continue that going forward. I will be doing this mostly from the perspective of the Java version, but the update is mostly the same for Bedrock, and I will try to point out any major differences along the way. This is easily one of the largest updates Minecraft has received, packed full of new biomes, new plants, new blocks, new mobs, even an entirely new tier of equipment. There is a tremendous amount for us to unpack here, which has made this video tremendously long. If you'd like to skip to certain parts, there will be timestamps in the description. So with that, let's step through the portal and check out Minecraft 1.16, the Nether update. So clearly the focus of this update was to renovate the Nether, and naturally that means we have some new Nether biomes to make it a more interesting place. If you include the old style of Nether that we are already familiar with, there are now 5 unique types of biomes in the Nether, each one containing new and unique additions to the game. So first we're going to take a general look at each biome, then we're going to come back through and cover all of the fancy new stuff that each one adds. One other quick thing of note, if you're playing on an existing world, these new biomes will generate just fine for you when you go to new terrain, and they will not ruin your Nether. At worst, you'll have some distinct biome lines between the old and new areas, but the terrain itself will match just fine. Getting right to it, let's get the boring one out of the way. The existing style of Nether that we are already familiar with still exists, and it's now referred to as the Nether Wastes biome. This is essentially identical to the existing Nether, with the only difference being some general changes to the Nether as a whole, like some new mobs and some new naturally generated blocks. More on those shortly. The first proper new biome is the Soul Sand Valley, a particularly ominous biome made almost entirely of soul sand. The fog turns a shade of turquoise, large pillars extend from the ground to the ceiling, there's giant fossils scattered around the landscape illuminated by blue flames, unsettling sounds of voices and whispers will emanate from all around you. It's a generally creepy place to be. Mob-wise, you'll be facing skeletons, endermen, and ghasts all across the biome. Obviously, running through an entire biome made of soul sand sounds pretty terrible, but much of that soul sand is actually a new type that doesn't slow you down, so you'll at least be able to dodge those ghast fireballs at your normal pace. One other thing of note, in the Java edition, due to the way that it tries to spawn mobs in this biome, the mob spawning tends to fail quite often, and this can actually lead to vastly increased mob spawning rates within nether fortresses. This makes them a good bit more dangerous than normal, and also a great spot for wither skeleton farming, but Mojang does intend to fix this behavior fairly quickly, so it's probably not worth seeking one out just to build a farm. Do be aware that the fortresses will be a bit rough until this is changed though. Next up we have the aptly named Crimson Forest. If you're a fan of red, then this is probably the biome for you. The ground is covered in this red, fungus-looking stuff, there are red plants, and of course these giant tree-like mushrooms that are, you guessed it, also red. There are also orange particles constantly swirling upwards from every direction throughout the entire biome, making it feel as if it's burning and hostile, which it absolutely is. There's a couple new mobs that are particularly common in this area, one of which is even exclusive to it, and they can be pretty aggressive in most circumstances. Once again, we'll be coming back to these guys shortly. The next biome is actually a counterpart to the Crimson Forest. This is the Warped Forest, and amongst the usual fiery hostility of the Nether, this one can feel almost magical. Most of the biome is a bright shade of cyan, including the giant mushroom trees, contrasting all of the warm colors seen elsewhere in the Nether. Strange vines grow upwards instead of down, purple particles flutter around, and even the sky itself turns purple while you're in this biome. In addition to that, the only potential hostile monster that can spawn in this biome are endermen, making it feel even more bizarre compared to its surroundings. I have no doubt that a lot of people will be making nether bases in this update, and for any base that's going to be actively used, I think this biome is where the majority will want to end up going. That being said, it is also the rarest nether biome, making up less than 10% of the nether on average, so you may have to do a little bit of searching to find one. Finally, we have the Basalt Delta, and this one is a straight-up volcano biome, complete with purplish gray fog and falling gray particles, making it look like it's covered in raining ash. It's mostly made up of a mixture of new gray and black stone-type blocks, forming jagged mountain-like terrain. It's actually particularly dangerous to traverse because in addition to general pools of lava and magma blocks scattered throughout, there are also deep chasms that you can easily fall into with few options for escape. Ghasts can spawn in this biome, but because of the rough terrain, it's not super common. The one hostile mob that you will be seeing a ton of here are magma cubes, and they overflow from these biomes. Like, seriously, they're absolutely everywhere. These guys can actually be pretty dangerous here due to how many nasty spots they can knock you into, so do watch your step. Throughout these new biomes, you'll be hearing a lot of unique sounds, both ambient and music. There were over 100 ambient sounds added just for these new nether areas. Some of those will play at random, others will play in response to your quote-unquote mood, a new system that makes it so the deeper and darker the areas you traverse, the more often you will hear spooky noises. This also applies to the overworld as well, by the way. There were also 3 new background music tracks added to the game, each attributed to certain nether biomes. You'll hear these tracks in the Nether Wastes, Crimson Forest, Soul Sand Valley, and Basalt Delta biomes, and they fit these areas fairly well. These tracks are also the first ones added to the game that are not done by C418. Instead, these tracks were actually composed by Lena Rain, who you may know as the person behind the soundtrack of Celeste, and if so, you know these tracks were in good hands. Side note about music, on the Bedrock Edition they are also finally getting the 3 music tracks associated with the ocean biomes from Update Aquatic, which for some reason they still didn't have. So that covers the basic look at the biomes themselves. Now let's check out the new blocks that we get from them. First up, the Nether now contains its own variant of gold ore called Nether Gold Ore. This does not give you a brand new material, instead it's just an ore that can be mined to give you gold nuggets, 2 to 6 at a time without using fortune. This does of course mean that mining with Fortune 3 is beneficial, as it can give you up to 24 gold nuggets at a time, though it would still be slightly more efficient on average to use Silk Touch and smelt the block for a full ingot. More so than anything, it's just a way to tie in old and new references to gold in the Nether. Now then, let's head back to the Soul Sand Valley. First off, I'll mention that the pillars in this biome that extend from the floor up to the ceiling are made of a new block called Basalt. But given that is much more relevant to the Basalt Delta biome, we'll leave that until then. For now, let's look at the new type of soul sand, which is dubbed Soul Soil. Essentially, this is a block similar in color to soul sand, with a slightly different texture, and you don't sink down into it, meaning that it doesn't slow you down. So it's already quite useful in the sense that it helps you traverse the Soul Sand Valley biome, and similar to soul sand, it can also be used to summon the Wither, however, it cannot be used to grow netherwort. It does have another interaction, but again, that's a little more relevant to a different new block, so we'll revisit that shortly. This block does lead to a few other new additions, though. Both Soul Sand and Soul Soil can now be lit on fire, and that fire won't extinguish, similar to Netherrack. More importantly, that fire will be blue. This is Soul Fire. Soul Fire is distinct from regular fire in 3 ways, beyond the obvious color difference. First is that it's not quite as bright, emitting a light level of 10 instead of 15. It also deals roughly twice as much direct damage when standing on it, and it does not spread, so you don't need to worry about it burning down your structures. Soul Fire was also not just a single addition. Instead, it also serves as an alternative to normal fire in a few other light sources. This means we have soul torches, soul lanterns, and soul campfires, which replace the orange flames and glows of their normal variants with the light blue of the new Soul Fire. Unfortunately, like Soulfire itself, all of these blocks only emit a light level of 10, so they aren't particularly good for lighting that is meant to prevent mob spawning. Soul torches are crafted similar to regular torches, with a stick and a piece of coal or charcoal, but you'll also need a piece of soul sand or soul soil to put below those in the crafting table. Soulfire lanterns are then made using the Soulfire torches with the same layout as the normal lantern recipe, surrounding the torch with 8 iron nuggets. And as for the soul campfire, that is again the same layout as the normal recipe, but you replace the coal with soul sand or soul soil. So that will take 3 logs, 3 sticks, and a soul sand or soul soil block. Now let's head to the 2 forest biomes, and we're going to cover these together because they tend to go hand in hand. Let's start off by talking about all of the new plant life, starting with the Nylium. Nylium is essentially mycelium, but nether style. This is the strange material growing on netherrack that makes the ground red or turquoise in each of the forest biomes. As it's on the netherrack instead of dirt, this means you need a pickaxe to break these blocks, and if you want to actually pick the material up, you're going to need Silk Touch. Breaking the block without it will leave you with only netherrack. Both types of Nylium can be bone mealed, which will grow the various plant life, mostly from the biome the block is naturally from, but on Java can also rarely spawn a mushroom that is normally from the opposite type of forest. You can also use this bone meal on a regular netherrack block that is next to a nylium block, and the nylium will spread to it, but nylium will not spread naturally. The nylium will also die if a solid block is left on top of it, similar to dirt or mycelium, but will not die under water or lava. Almost all of the plants grown on nylium can be picked up by simply breaking them, no shears or silk touch required. They also can be placed within a composter and turned into bone meal should you want to do that. 3 of these new plant types are purely decorative, those being the nether sprouts, crimson roots, and warped roots. None of them serve any direct purpose other than looking cool, but they can all be placed on top of nylium, soul soil, or any variant of dirt other than mycelium, making them interesting options if you want some particularly unique looking plants. Nether sprouts look like a very short type of cyan grass and will generate exclusively on warped nylium. This is the one plant type here that does, on Java at least, require shears or silk touch to be picked up. It will just break if you use anything else. There's nothing else much to say about this, though I would love to see a normal grass variant of this size. The crimson and warped roots are also purely decorative, though they do have the additional function of being able to be placed in flower pots. Again, some really cool plants to keep in mind if you need something aesthetically unique for a build, but that's about it. The warped roots are exclusive to the warped forest, while the crimson variant is a bit more hardy and can generate mostly in crimson forests, but also warped forests or even soul sand valleys. If you want plants that offer a little more functionality, look no further than the 2 new types of vines. Weeping vines are red, spiky-looking vines that you will find hanging around throughout the crimson forest biomes, and twisting vines are a bizarre beanstalk-looking plant that will actually grow upwards from the ground and are found in warped forests. Like regular vines, these plants will grow to random lengths and can be climbed on, but unlike normal vines, you can also use bone meal on them. They don't just grow 1 block at a time either, they will grow a random number of blocks, up to 5, with a single bone meal. Obtaining them is also slightly different, as not only can you shear or silk touch them, but simply breaking them also gives you a 33% chance to get the block back, and this can be increased with a fortune tool. So being interesting looking plants that can be climbed is cool enough, but their unique growing mechanics also make them somewhat useful. Due to the upwards growing behavior of the twisting vines, they essentially act as an infinite ladder that can be placed anywhere and grown on demand, sort of like scaffolding blocks that can be bone mealed. This makes for an interesting way of navigating difficult terrain, or it could be automated with redstone to make all of your Mario vine climbing dreams a reality. This also applies to the weeping vines, which can be quickly grown downwards if you want to create a safe path down from a high place. You can also place blocks against or in place of them, meaning they can be used to start building in areas that would normally be quite difficult to get a block to. Next up we have the new mushrooms, or more specifically the crimson fungus and warped fungus. As you may imagine, these generate predominantly on their matching nylium, though if you're on Java, these do have a rare chance of showing up on the opposing type. They can also be placed on all of the same blocks as the previously mentioned plants can, so that's nylium, soul soil, or any of the dirt types other than mycelium, and unlike normal mushrooms, these do not care about the light levels, and they of course can also be placed in flower pots. That's all well and good, it's always nice to have more plant types for detail, but it gets better when you bone meal them. Bone mealing one of the new fungus while on its matching type of nylium will grow a huge fungus, a tree-like mushroom matching the color scheme of one of the new forest biomes. The huge crimson fungus generates with a canopy made of netherwort blocks, can have some weeping vines hanging down from it, and the stem has an interesting animated texture with red veins climbing up the sides. The huge warped fungus is very similar, except its canopy is made of warped wart blocks. Unfortunately, there is no actual warped wart in the game. Hopefully that's something they come back in and add at some point, even if only for the visual aspect. The stem also has the same animated texture, though in this case the veins are more of a turquoise color. So these are pretty cool, but the true magic of the huge fungus lies in the stem blocks. Despite technically being giant mushrooms, these crimson stem and warped stem blocks are less like the mushroom stem blocks we currently have, and more like logs. In fact, they function exactly like logs. They even look like them if you look at the sides without the quote-unquote bark on them. You can even place them in a 2x2 grid to get hyphae blocks, which is just the bark on all 6 sides, similar to how we can do that with wood blocks. You can even right-click all of these blocks with an axe to strip the bark off, similar to regular trees, to be left with some very uniquely colored stripped log-type blocks. As I'm sure you've inferred, these are entirely new and rather unique wood types. Of course, having such abnormal colors means they may not be the most used blocks in traditional building, but their unique appearance and the fact that they are proper wood blocks with every block variant available to them does make them very interesting building options. Planks, slabs, stairs, fences, fence gates, signs, buttons, pressure plates, trapdoors, and doors are all available in both of these new variations. However, neither of them can be crafted into boats. They also have the very unique property of not being flammable, so anything crafted with these wood types can be used around fire or lava with no problem. It will definitely be a challenge for most people to find ways to build with them, but they also open up some very unique creative possibilities. The warped blocks in particular are a nice color, and they work exceptionally well with prismarine type blocks, and despite their fiery origin, are even well suited for entirely underwater builds. Going back to the huge fungus for just a moment, you may have also noticed these strange looking light sources near the top. This is a shroom light, a new block that emits a light level of 15, similar to other light emitting blocks like glowstone. Breaking them with anything, even your hands, will drop the block, though a hoe will break them slightly faster. This is a fairly strange block aesthetically, so I doubt it will be taking over as a main light source for most situations. That being said, there are always ways to use everything that's added, it just takes the right build and a bit of creativity. Now then, moving on to blocks from the final biome, the Basalt Delta, and what better place to start than the block the biome is named for. This biome is made up predominantly of basalt, a new type of dark gray stone, and the one mentioned earlier as the pillars of the Soul Sand Valley biome. The top of the block has a rough cobble-like texture, and the sides have a slightly smoother but still somewhat rough feel to them. These blocks can also be placed in a 2x2 grid or a stone cutter to make polished basalt, which is slightly lighter in color, has a pattern on the top and bottom, and obviously is a bit smoother and more polished looking overall. There is also a way to actually generate basalt yourself utilizing the new soul soil block. If lava flows on top of soul soil, while it is also touching blue ice blocks, a block of basalt will form. This is fairly similar to how we can generate stone or cobblestone, though honestly even easier, so creating a machine to help generate this block should be pretty simple if you want a lot of it. So basalt is a good addition as it is, but unfortunately they just don't have any other block types like stairs or slabs. Because of that, it doesn't really fit the bill as the darker stone type that many of us have been waiting for a very, very long time. So say hello to Blackstone. Blackstone is the second block making up the bulk of the Basalt Delta, though it can also be found in occasional pockets throughout the entire Nether, and this block is the answer to one of my longest requests for the game, a Blackstone type with a lot of variants. There are 3 different levels of refinement to Blackstone, each with block, slab, stair, and wall variants, as well as a few extras on top of that. First you have the natural rough version, just called Blackstone, which is what you'll find out in the world. The texture itself is very similar to the basalt block, but of course it's black, which is tremendously useful to have as a natural looking stone type block. It also functions as cobblestone in recipes, allowing you to make tools or a furnace out of it. Unfortunately, there aren't specific Blackstone variants of those items, so they will still look like regular stone, but it does open up some interesting options for trying to survive in the Nether. Placing 4 of those Blackstone blocks in a 2x2 grid will give you Polished Blackstone, a more refined looking version similar to other polished stone types. Of course, this can also be converted into slabs, stairs, and walls, but on top of that, the polished version can also be used to craft black buttons and pressure plates. It's also possible to take 2 of the polished Blackstone slabs and put them on top of each other in a crafting grid to get a chiseled polished Blackstone block. Take note of the special carving on this block, you'll be seeing it again later. Those polished Blackstone blocks can be used for one other recipe. Placing them in a 2x2 grid will give you polished Blackstone bricks. These look about how you would imagine, the typical Minecraft style bricks, but in a Blackstone style. Again, you have the slab, stair, and wall variants using the usual crafting recipes, and similar to regular stone bricks, if you put them in a furnace, you will get a cracked polished Blackstone brick out. There is one other type of Blackstone, though it's a rather special one that cannot be crafted and is somewhat difficult to find. That is the Gilded Blackstone, a special variant of Blackstone infused with gold nuggets. So this block does drop gold nuggets, and it's fairly unique in how it works. Essentially, there is a chance when you break the block that you will get 2 to 5 gold nuggets from it, but if you don't, then the block will drop itself, allowing you to pick it back up. By default, this is a 10% chance, but it is increased by fortune up to a guaranteed gold nugget drop with fortune 3. If you want a guarantee of getting the block itself, which you may want to do as they are somewhat hard to find, Silk Touch will work. There's no particular function to these blocks beyond just looking pretty cool, but finding them is an interesting adventure because they generate exclusively in a new structure. We're not quite ready to cover that just yet, but we'll get there shortly. Blackstone is a massive addition to the game that opens up huge realms of possibilities that we just did not have before. Unfortunately, we still don't have a counterpart to it. A white stone type would be absolutely fantastic as well, but an existing block did get an addition to help fill this gap just a little bit. That is the Quartz block, which now has a brick variant. By placing 4 quartz blocks in a 2x2 grid, you'll get quartz bricks out, which are similar to the usual stone brick style, though it does actually have a slightly unique pattern to it. For what it is, I think it actually looks pretty good and will make for some very elegant looking builds. I still want a white stone type though, Mojang. Quartz isn't the only block that got some new variants though. Nether brick also got a couple new variants in the form of cracked and chiseled blocks. As usual, these are crafted the same way as other similar blocks. Placing a nether brick block in the furnace will give you a cracked nether brick block, and placing 2 nether brick slabs on top of each other in a crafting grid will give you a chiseled nether brick block, which has a very cool wither skull engraving on it. As always, additional block variants are always fantastic. These two look great and will make working with nether brick way better. There was another change to an existing kind of block, or an entire shape of block more specifically. The wall blocks no longer have a gap between them when stacked vertically. If you were using that behavior as an aesthetic detail, unfortunately that will no longer work, but it does also make walls vastly more useful in building in general. I mean, you can actually use them to make tall walls that actually look like walls now, which is kinda nice. Do note that they also still let light through, so if you were using them for that, it's still fine for now. It also means they work exceptionally well for hidden lighting. I suspect this will be considered a bug and changed at some point, but for right now, it is super useful. Back to the trend of long-time requests being fulfilled, next up we have the new chain block. This is another one of those detail blocks that we've been asking to have for a very long time, and we finally have it, and it's pretty awesome. These can be placed anywhere and are able to float, so they don't need a solid block supporting them. The texture was made to match the chains used on the lantern blocks, so those look perfect when placed below the chain blocks. Unfortunately, the chains do only go straight up and down right now. You can't place them sideways or anything like that at the moment, but still, very cool addition. They can even be waterlogged should you want to do something underwater with them. To craft these chains, you'll need 1 iron ingot in the middle row of a crafting table and 2 iron nuggets, 1 above and 1 below. If you've been around since the days of beta, this next block may come as a bit of a surprise. Crying Obsidian has officially been added to the game. This block has quite a history, going back to the beta over 9 years ago where it was going to be how we set our spawn points. This was quickly discarded with the addition of beds, but because the old texture was in the game files for a few months, it became something of a fascination among players. Well, the Crying Obsidian block has finally had its day and it is now part of the game for real. It takes the form of obsidian with cracks of purple energy wrapping around it, though the old beta texture is part of the Programmer Art resource pack if you enable that. As the name implies, the block does also cry in the form of purple particles that will drip out from the sides and bottom of the block, a very subtle effect, but one that could be used for some interesting effects. Beyond that, the block by itself is basically the same as Obsidian. It shares all of the same basic properties, except that it emits a light level of 10, and that it does not work in nether portals. So let's say you get your hands on some Crying Obsidian. Does it have any other uses? Well, yes. It actually serves the same purpose it was originally meant for all those years ago, setting your spawn point. More specifically, it's used to craft another new block that sets your spawn point, the Respawn Anchor. The Respawn Anchor works exclusively in the Nether. It can be placed and even charged in other dimensions, but actually right-clicking to use it will result in an explosion, similar to beds in the Nether or End. The process for using them is a bit different from using a bed as well, as using the Respawn Anchor takes up charges. When you first place the block, it's inactive and cannot be used. You have to instead charge it by right-clicking with a glowstone block, and these will be consumed in the process. Once it has a charge, the top of the block will show a swirling purple particle effect similar to a nether portal. Particles will rise up from the top, and the circles on the side of the block will start filling in with gold, and it will also start emitting light. As you place in more glowstone blocks, the circle will fill more and the light level will increase. The anchor can hold up to 4 charges, at which point the circle on the side will be filled in entirely and the block will emit a light level of 15. So long as the respawn anchor has a charge, you can right-click the block and set it as your spawn point. However, the charge is not used until you respawn there. Each time you die or return from the end and respawn using the respawn anchor, it will use up 1 charge. If all of the charges are used up, it will no longer work as a spawn point and will need to be refilled for you to spawn there again. Trying to respawn when the anchor is empty will send you back to your world spawn point, same as if your bed is broken or blocked. You can automate this refilling process, as you can get the respawn anchor's current charge level using a comparator, which will output a value from 0 to 15 based on the charge, and you can put glowstone into the anchor using a dispenser. If you want to pick the block up, you will need to use at least a diamond pick to do so, as it is essentially a block of obsidian after all, which of course also means it is quite blast resistant. So the respawn anchor is quite useful, and it also is a very interesting option for building. Between its rather unique aesthetic and the fact that it is a viable option for providing lighting, there are definitely some cool things that can be done with this block. If you want to craft one of these blocks, in a crafting table, place 6 crying obsidian, 3 across the top row and 3 across the bottom, along with 3 glowstone blocks across the middle row. Of course, this still leaves the question of how we actually get that crying obsidian, and there are 2 main ways to do so. One is a system involving a new mob, which we will cover shortly. The other is by finding it in a couple new structures. One of those new structures is the Ruins Portal. These are broken nether portals that you will come across in both the overworld and in the nether. There are 13 variants to them, including a few larger scale ones that will generate quite rarely. When you find them in the overworld, they will have netherrack generated around them, and usually have some remnants of stone structures around the portal itself. The ones in the nether will instead have blackstone structures around them. These can generate both on the surface and underground. The main purpose of these structures is to act as a hint about nether portals, as previously there was no way to learn about them without external sources. It's still pretty ambiguous, but it's at least a hint of what's there. This is helped by the chest that will spawn nearby, which often contains things like extra obsidian and a flint and steel. There are some other rewards as well, ranging from small things like iron nuggets, flint and gold nuggets, up to enchanted gold armor, bells, gold blocks, and even enchanted golden apples, those last few being quite rare. There will also frequently be an extra gold block or 2 near the portal itself. Now there is one major change that affects the entire nether that I have not mentioned yet, and that is a new type of ore. So in addition to quartz and the new Nether Gold Ore, you'll be able to find blocks of ancient debris. You can find these in any biome, but they are quite difficult to find if you aren't very specifically searching for them. Not only are they quite rare, but they also won't generate in open air, meaning that outside of some niche circumstances, you will always have to dig to find these blocks. Each chunk has a possibility of generating 2 veins of ancient debris. A vein of 1 to 3 ore can generate between layers 8 and 22, and a vein of 1 or 2 ore can generate anywhere between layers 8 and 119. Now that does not mean that those veins will always generate. In fact, it actually averages to about 1.7 ancient debris blocks per chunk. The quickest way to find them is likely to strip mine standing at about Y level 14 or so. That should put you in the highest concentration area and keep you well under most of the lava lakes. Keep in mind, there are a lot of other sources of lava down at that level though, so having some good fire resistant armor or a fire resistance potion on hand at all times is probably a good idea. You don't need to worry about the ancient debris blocks themselves though, as not only are they very tough blocks, requiring a diamond pickaxe to break them and having the same blast resistance as obsidian, but they are also completely fire and lava resistant. If you accidentally drop an ancient debris block into lava, it will just float back up to the top. So you find yourself some ancient debris, what then? Well, ancient debris is an ore, so you smelt it of course. But this will just give you an intermediate material called netherite scraps. These scraps don't do anything on their own, they are simply a middle step to crafting the new ingot that we're really after, the netherite ingot. In order to craft a netherite ingot, you need to place 4 netherite scraps and 4 gold ingots into a crafting grid. Yes, you need to find 4 gold and 4 of these very rare ancient debris blocks to smelt down to get a single one of these ingots. So why go through so much trouble? First off, you could craft a block of netherite. This is a typical storage block, crafted by filling a crafting grid with netherite ingots, and it of course can be crafted back into 9 ingots as well. It is also one of the coolest looking blocks in the game. Not to mention its texture is super useful for things like more industrial building, which is an area we are sorely lacking building options in. Unfortunately, taking 9 ingots to craft means you would need to find 36 ancient debris to craft a single one of these blocks, making them easily one of the most time-expensive blocks in the game. Thankfully, it also retains the fire and lava resistant abilities of the ancient debris, so at least you can't lose it to lava. They do also work to power beacons, so if you really want to flex, a full netherite beacon is definitely the peak of showing off in Minecraft now. You just need to find 5,904 ancient debris blocks first. There is another block that can be crafted using the netherite ingot, and that is the lodestone. This is a way to change where a compass points to, instead of only pointing to the world spawn point. If you use a compass to right-click on a lodestone, it will become a lodestone compass and point back to that spot as long as the lodestone still exists. And this can be done in the nether or end as well. If the lodestone is broken, or if you're in a different dimension from the lodestone, the compass will spin wildly, much like the regular compass does in the nether or end. The block itself also has a pretty cool texture, but again, being a block that uses netherite ingots, it does make it rather expensive to use in bulk. If you want to craft one of these yourself, you're going to need to put a netherite ingot in the middle of a crafting table and surround it with chiseled stone blocks. So those new blocks are cool and all, but the true purpose of netherite is to act as an entirely new tier of gear in the game. This is the first time a new tier of gear has been added to Minecraft since the very first introduction of armor back in its earliest days. It's also fairly unique in that instead of crafting the gear from scratch, you actually upgrade existing gear. The way this is done is by using a smithing table. If you've forgotten, smithing tables are one of the blocks added in 1.14 to give villagers their professions, but the smithing table was one of 2, the other being the fletching table, that still did not have another use beyond that. Well, now if you right-click a smithing table, it will open up an upgrade gear window, and all you have to do is drop in a piece of diamond gear and a single netherite ingot. It only takes 1 ingot, it does not require experience, and it will upgrade any piece of diamond equipment, whether it's a weapon, tool, or armor, to a piece of netherite equipment. This means if you want a complete set of every kind of netherite equipment, it will only take 9 ingots. Those blocks of netherite seem even more expensive now, don't they? Doing this will upgrade your equipment directly and will not remove any existing enchantments on it. So that's really cool, but why bother upgrading? Well, to begin with, netherite gear just looks really cool. I would probably make the upgrade even if it was only visual because the black just looks really good. They also still retain the fire and lava resistance of netherite ingots. This does not make you fireproof, but it means the equipment itself cannot be destroyed by fire or lava. Even if you die in a pool of lava and everything else burns up, you can come back and this equipment will have floated to the top. Successfully retrieving it is another matter entirely, but this is a huge deal in softening the blow of dying. On top of that, netherite gear itself is also just straight up better than regular diamond gear. All netherite pieces have a higher durability than diamond, by about 12%, and are slightly faster for breaking blocks, though still not quite as fast as gold tools. They will also do slightly more damage, obviously good for swords and axes, but even your pickaxe and shovel will hurt a bit more if you're forced to use them. They also have notably higher enchantability than diamonds, meaning they are more likely to get higher level enchantments, though again, still a bit less likely than the gold equipment. The armor is the same story. It's a good bit more durable, and while the base defense values are the same, it does have an extra point of toughness, meaning it will give you just a little bit more defense against strong attacks. It will also give you a little bit of knockback resistance, which as of 1.16 will reduce how much you get knocked back, rather than simply making it less likely to happen like it would previously. Basically, Netherite is a full-on upgrade that really, there's no reason not to utilize. I suppose if you don't have mending for some reason, needing Netherite ingots to repair the equipment could be a hassle, but even in that case, I would still say it's well worth doing. There were a couple other noteworthy changes to equipment, including several changes to make hoes more useful. First up, they can now be enchanted with Efficiency, Fortune, and Silk Touch, in addition to the Unbreaking, Mending, and Curse of Vanishing they had previously. So if you want to do something like Fortune Crops or Silk Touch when you don't have another tool with it handy, the Humble Hoe is now an option. Of course, that by itself doesn't seem that useful because hoes were never the best option for breaking blocks, but that is no longer the case. There are now several blocks in the game that are broken faster using a hoe. These are sponges, dried kelp blocks, netherwart blocks, warped wart blocks, shroom lights, hay bales, leaves, and target blocks. We'll get to that last one shortly. All of these blocks will now break faster with a hoe than any other tool, and this is especially noteworthy in the case of leaves. This is because of the ability to use Fortune. If you've ever tried to build up a supply of saplings, especially jungle saplings which have a lower drop chance, it can take quite a long time. With this change, you can very quickly break all of the leaves while using Fortune 3 to get the maximum output, so it is genuinely a rather useful change. Speaking of enchantments, there is actually one brand new enchantment in this update called Soul Speed. This is another boot exclusive enchantment. It can be combined with any other boot enchantments, and the purpose of this one is to make you move faster on Soul Sand and Soul Soil. Initially, that doesn't sound like much. It sounds like something added just to make getting around the Soul Sand Valley biome a little easier, but the speed increase is actually pretty impressive, and it also stacks with other movement effects like speed from a beacon. It even gives you a really cool particle effect of souls coming up from the blocks as you run. This enchantment has 3 levels. At level 1, Soul Sand no longer slows you, and you move just a tiny bit faster than you do on normal blocks. At level 2, you can move a bit faster still, a little over a 20% increase over normal speed. At level 3, you're at nearly a 50% increase in movement speed compared to when you're on most blocks. And again, this can stack with potion or beacon effects. If you want to build some super speed walkways around your builds, this is now the way to do it. Of course, having soul sand or soul soil paths isn't always the most visually appealing, but this effect will trigger through up to 1/8 of a block, so things like carpets, trapdoors, or snow layers can be used to obscure it without removing the effect. There is a downside to the enchantment, however, and that's that it does wear down the durability of your boots. By default, this will average about 1 durability every 25 blocks that you walk over. And of course, this only applies to Soul Sand and Soul Soil, not regular blocks where the speed boost is inactive. This can be reduced a little bit by also having the Unbreaking enchantment. With Unbreaking 3, you get about 32.5 blocks per point of durability. Probably not a huge problem with mending, but it is worth keeping in mind. So, how do we obtain it? Well, this enchantment is quite special and quite rare. It's a treasure enchantment, meaning it cannot be obtained in an enchanting table, but it also can't be found via trading, fishing, or loot chests in existing structures. In order to explain how we get this enchantment, we first need to cover some of the new mobs. To begin, let's talk about the first exclusive food source in the Nether, the Hoglin. These boar-like beasts spawn in groups in the Crimson Forest biome, and with 20 hit points and the potential to do up to 6.5 hearts of damage in a single attack on hard difficulty, they can definitely be a threat if you're ill-prepared. They are also 50% resistant to knockback, making it harder to fight against them, especially if you're facing a group, and they also have quite a significant range to their attack. On top of that, their attacks tend to send you into the air slightly, which could easily launch you off of tall ledges to your death. Even the baby Hoglin will charge straight in to attack you. Granted, they do very little damage and will retreat if attacked, but they've got moxie. While a good set of gear will keep you pretty safe against them, it is also possible to avoid conflict with them entirely by scaring them. The Hoglins are afraid of a few different things, notably warped fungus, including if it's in a flower pot, respawn anchors, and nether portals. If you're near any of those blocks, the Hoglins will try to run away. You can even get pretty close to them when they're in this state, though it is possible for them to still attack, so do be careful. If that fails, you can light them on fire or dump lava on them to fight back, as unlike most other nether mobs, the Hoglins are not immune to fire or lava damage. They also have a weird interaction with water in that they will sink and immediately start drowning in it, and I say that's weird because this mob can't really leave the nether, and the drowning won't actually be what kills them. More on that in a second. Now, as I said, these hoglins are a proper food source in the nether. They actually drop 2 to 4 pork chops when killed, or up to 7 with looting 3, as well as a couple leather, so they are actually a pretty good food source, but of course if you had to go out and find them every time you needed food, it wouldn't work very well. So despite being a hostile mob, you can actually both tie leads to hoglins and breed them together using crimson fungus. It's actually important that you do feed them if you want to keep them around, as hoglins do naturally despawn, but feeding them a crimson fungus will prevent that and allow them to be kept around. This does not mean they are tamed though. They will still attack you, and they do have enough range to reach through fences and walls, so actually farming these guys can be a bit of a challenge. They do open up some interesting options in terms of automated farming as well, given they are a hostile mob that spawns quickly in a specific biome and their movement is easily controlled. Making a hoglin farm is actually an incredibly easy and massively efficient way of getting tremendous amounts of good food in the form of cooked pork chops. They do have one other unique behavior, and that is what happens when they get forced through a nether portal. It turns out hoglins are pretty sensitive to their environment. If they end up outside of the nether, whether that's the overworld or the end, they will start shaking. After 15 seconds, they will zombify and become zombie hoglins, or as they are officially called, zoglins. Zoglins are even more vicious than the hoglins, attacking literally anything except for each other and creepers. They'll even try to attack armor stands, despite that not working. That is just how aggressive, and somewhat dim-witted, they are. They no longer can be bred, nor are they scared of anything like the hoglins were. Basically, they're just undead killing machines unleashed onto the world, and given they have roughly the same stats as hoglins, 20 hit points and dealing up to 6 hearts of damage on hard difficulty, they do a pretty good job at it. Being undead, they now only drop rotten flesh, they do not need to breathe underwater, smite is super effective against them, health potions harm them, and damage potions heal them, just like other undead mobs. They do not, however, burn in the sunlight. Next, let's cover the most significant new mob. Let me introduce you to the Piglin. Yes, we're really hammering in this pig theme with the nether. You will find these oinky boys spawning in Crimson Forest and Nether Wastes biomes, equipped with a mixture of golden armor, golden swords, and crossbows. Like many other mobs, they also tend to prefer staying close together, forming groups with any other piglins they find in a 32-block radius. They can also spawn as babies, which won't naturally spawn with armor or weapons, and also tend to be a bit friendlier than the adults. Like the hoglins, piglins are kind of unique in their interactions with water, lava, and fire. Unlike most other nether mobs, they are not immune to fire and lava damage and will die if they stand in either. They will also be incapable of swimming, which means if they end up in a body of water, they will most likely drown, but that's also not much of a concern considering they also can't leave the nether. If a piglin manages to get outside of the nether, they will start shaking and then become zombified 15 seconds later, just like the hoglins do. Despite the passive nature of their dead brethren, the piglins are actually quite hostile. They will attack wither skeletons and withers without hesitation, and will also often attack adult hoglins that they see in the area unless they are outnumbered, in which case they will try to avoid them. While the hoglins will never initiate the battle, they also have this behavior of avoiding being outnumbered, leading to back and forth battles between groups. This aggression does not apply with baby hoglins though, who instead seem to be playmates for the baby piglins. The baby piglins will actually try to ride the baby hoglins at times, and sometimes will even stack up to 3 tall while doing it, which is quite a sight. When the piglins do attack and manage to kill a hoglin, there's a 10% chance they will break out into a victory dance. More important than that though, they will also attack you, and they are pretty aggressive about it. They will all attack as a group against anyone that upsets them, and they even have the ability to open doors, which they will absolutely chase you through should you try and hide. If you want to clear piglins from an area without fighting, they are also afraid of both warped fungus and all of the new soulfire based blocks. So that's soulfire, soul torches, soul lanterns, and soul campfires. These things are not scary enough to stop them from attacking you once they've started though, so if you want some real safety, you will want to hide behind a zombified piglin. Piglins are so afraid of these guys that they will prioritize running away over killing you. There are a couple different ways you can trigger the wrath of these feisty pig people that you need to watch out for. Generally, they are just hostile towards players to begin with, and obviously hitting them will make them angry, but so will breaking any kind of gold block, including the new Nether Gold Ore, so do keep an eye out for them if you're mining that. They're also quite possessive over things in containers, so opening or breaking any type of chest, barrel, or shulker box will also make them angry, even if you are the one that placed them. This does not apply to blocks that aren't specifically meant for storage, like hoppers or furnaces. This behavior might sound a little strange, but there is a good reason for it, as you'll see shortly. So these guys are sounding pretty mean and hard to deal with, but there is a way around their aggression. Gold. These guys love gold. If you're wearing a single piece of golden armor, they will become neutral to you and will even occasionally make specific noises to voice how envious they are of your bling. They can still be angered in all of the ways mentioned previously, but they will be neutral to you until you actually do something they don't like. They will also actively seek out and pick up anything made of gold. When they do so, they will admire their find for a few seconds before either equipping it or storing it in their own 8-slot inventory. They will even replace superior equipment for gold, they just love it that much. Again, they will do this with nearly everything that is visually gold, from gold ore to gold horse armor to bells to glistering melons, so long as they have space for them in their inventory. They do pick up gold nuggets, but they don't seem to actively seek them out, and this is also true of pork chops, which they will pick up after killing a hoglin. Do piglins eat pork chops? Isn't that kind of messed up? Anyway, if they die, then everything they've equipped or stored in their inventory will drop at the same time, though strangely, the only other items they can drop is the equipment they spawn with. They have no regular drops. That's still noteworthy though, as their boots can have the soul speed enchantment on them, which, as we'll discuss in a moment, is fairly rare to get elsewhere. When it comes to armor, they will pick up and equip just about anything. They won't downgrade to something lower, except in the case of gold, which they will, of course, prioritize above all else. They do also put on literally anything that can be equipped, even things like carved pumpkins or dragon heads, which is pretty great. Fun fact, these will actually stay on them after they zombify as well. Baby piglins are a little different. They still actively seek out gold items and will equip gold gear, but they will also pick up anything else that gets dropped and will hold on to it. They will still strongly prefer gold items, but they can hold pretty much anything. There is one other trait to the piglins we have not yet discussed, and that is the bartering system. Despite not being particularly friendly with players, they love gold so much that they are willing to trade you for it. Now, this is not a friendly transaction like it is with villagers. They do not give you any fancy windows where you choose your trades. No, none of that. You give them a gold ingot and they will throw whatever they have handy in return. You can trigger this by either right-clicking them with a gold ingot or by throwing a gold ingot towards them, and after admiring it briefly, they will throw you a random payment back. You can even do this while they are trying to kill you, and they will stop in their tracks if it means they get some gold. But of course, once they have it, well, you should probably run. As for what you can get from them, there's quite a few different blocks and items split into a few different rarities. You have some more common blocks and items that have a 5 to 10% chance of dropping, most of which are pretty trivial. Things like soul sand, obsidian, leather, or magma cream, though they can also give you crying obsidian, making it an easily renewable block. They have a couple slightly less common options with different versions of fire resistance potions and iron nuggets, but it is their two rarest trades that are the worthwhile ones. At a 1 to 2% chance, they can give you iron boots or an enchanted book, both of which will be enchanted with a random level of soul speed. As mentioned earlier, this enchantment can't be gained in any of the traditional ways, and in fact, this is the only renewable way to get access to the books, allowing you to place the enchantment on your shiny new netherite boots. There's no real way to influence these trades, and they aren't limited in any way. Once a trade is complete, you can immediately trigger another one, so it's a pretty easy thing to do in mass, so long as you have a good amount of gold laying around. That's pretty much all there is to the piglins themselves, but they do still have one big secret. That is their home, the Bastion Remnant, the ruined remains of castle-like structures made of blackstone found all throughout the Nether, except for the Basalt Delta biome. These structures tend to be pretty large, and due to their ruined state, can take some dedication and a careful step to navigate. With over 160 different pieces that can be generated in a multitude of different ways, these structures can have quite a lot going on, but when you really get down to it, there are only 4 main sections that can make up a Bastion Remnant. Those are bridges, housing units, Hoglins stables, and treasure rooms. You're not likely to see all 4 of these at once, but they are all equally common. These buildings are in quite rough shape, and you'll have a hard time finding a clear path to get pretty much anywhere in them, but there are distinct pathways. You'll spend a lot of time navigating winding staircases, perilous drops, and trying to avoid angering an army of piglins and even a few hoglins. In fact, this is the one place where piglins and hoglins can coexist without fighting each other if a hoglin stable section is generated. Other than being great sources for gathering the various Blackstone brick blocks, it does also contain some other worthwhile rewards. First off, this is the only place you can find the gilded Blackstone blocks mentioned earlier. Those will usually be found in the lower parts of the Bastion, in the rougher areas made primarily of unrefined Blackstone. Just remember that the piglins will not approve of you breaking those blocks since they are considered gold. On that note, you will also find some straight up gold blocks laying around, especially if you find a treasure room which will have a large pile of them at the very bottom, guarded by a rather unique mob spawner that will spawn magma cubes. Where the loot really gets good though is in the chests, which of course will also make the piglins angry if you do so much as peek inside, unless you're particularly sneaky and pull the items out with a hopper first. So what's inside the chests? Well, you have a lot of basic stuff you may expect, lots of gold and golden armor of course, along with things like crossbows, arrows, chains, bone blocks, some iron, basic things like that. Each of the 4 types of areas within the Bastion can have slightly different loot that matches the area as well. Hoglin stables can give some other nether blocks like crimson nylium or crimson fungus for example, and of course the treasure room is more likely to be loaded with gold or even some diamond equipment. The goodies don't stop there, however. These chests can also give you harder to obtain blocks, like crying obsidian, lodestones, or even ancient debris and netherite ingots, making it always worthwhile to check every chest you find. They also can contain enchanted books with the soul speed enchantment, giving us another source for that. And it's still not over. There are 2 more items that can be found exclusively in these chests. The first is the Snout Banner pattern, a new option for banners that gives a little pig snout icon similar to the one we saw on the chiseled Blackstone blocks. Not much else to say about this one, but it's always nice to have more options for making banner art. The other unique drop from Bastion chests is a brand new music disc, the first one since 1.4.4 when weight was added. This rather unique red and gold disc is named Pigstep and is another track composed by Lena Rain. This is the only source where this disc can be found. You cannot get it from killing creepers with skeletons like others. It's definitely one of the better music discs too, so be sure to get a hold of one. Heading back to the mobs, the addition of living pig people has brought some changes to our old friend, the zombie pigmen. Their visual style has been updated to match that of the piglins, and they were even renamed to zombified piglins. Most of us will probably still call them zombie pigman, but officially they are renamed. Nothing else about their existing behavior or uses has been changed though. So far the new mobs have been mostly pretty hostile, but there is one more new nether mob that stands out. They also stand on top of lava. This is the Strider, a new passive mob that spawns in groups on top of any pool or sea of lava throughout the entire nether, and these guys can just casually stroll across the surface of lava no problem at all. In many ways they are actually quite similar to other passive mobs. They'll flee when hit, you can attach a lead to them, and they can be bred together by right-clicking them with a warped fungus. They're of no threat to you, and there's no real reason to kill them, as the most they can drop is a few string. Of course, they have some other unique properties of their own as well. While they're happy and comfortable skimming along the surface of lava, if they wander onto land, they will get cold, turning purple and shivering while also walking much slower. Unlike other new nether mobs, they can also survive in other dimensions. However, they are very vulnerable to water, including rain, and will die very quickly if exposed to it. They also have some very strange abilities to walk on top of other entities. There's not a whole lot of uses for this, given they move very slowly when not on top of lava, but I'm sure we can come up with a few unique uses for it. Striders also can spawn with a passenger, either a zombified piglin or a baby strider. These mobs also never get off of the Strider, even when the baby Strider grows up, so you can actually end up with an adult Strider riding another one. This leads us to the true purpose of the Strider, being Mojang's alternative to boats that can travel in lava. This was easily one of the most common requests for the Nether update, but instead of going the obvious route, we got the Strider instead. So obviously players can ride the Strider as well, though you will need a saddle to do so. Any Strider carrying a zombified piglin will already have one on if you're willing to fight the piglin for it, otherwise simply right-clicking them with a saddle will put it onto them, no taming required. However, much like with pigs, if you just hop on one, you'll find you can't really control where they go. You need something to lure them. Enter the warped fungus on a stick. As you may have guessed, this is a new item very similar in concept to the carrot on a stick that we use to control pigs. The only real difference between the two items is the use of a warped fungus instead of a carrot. They're also crafted in much the same way, combining a fishing pole with a warped fungus. Actually using the item is much the same as well. Having it equipped while riding a strider will cause the strider to walk forward. You can also right-click while holding it to give the strider a decent speed boost to really book it across the lava, and this will take 1 durability from the warped fungus on a stick each time it's used. If you want to mitigate this durability loss with unbreaking and mending, you can, but it has to be applied using books via an anvil. It cannot be enchanted directly. They can also have Curse of Vanishing put on them, but since you can't create the warped fungus on a stick using an already enchanted fishing rod, I'm not sure why you would ever end up in that situation. So that does it for the new Nether mobs and the things relating directly to them, but there have been some changes to mobs outside of the Nether as well. First off, there have been a couple changes to villagers, most notably farmer villagers. Farmers now have another interaction with their workstation, which is of course the composter. They will now place excess seeds into the composter, which of course will eventually fill up and create a piece of bone meal. They can then pick that bone meal up and use them on their crops to grow them faster, and you could even throw them more bone meal yourself if you wanted to. They will also share wheat with other farmers to allow them to craft bread instead of always converting it automatically themselves. This won't likely do much in terms of how we currently use villagers for automated farming, but it does open up some new options. Villagers in general are also a bit different in how they identify their workstation. They now need to physically walk up to a workstation to claim it, instead of randomly picking one within a wide range, so they're a little more controllable in that regard. They will also no longer do this during raids or nighttime, so keep that in mind if you're used to sorting villagers at night. They also will notice that their workstation is no longer valid if they're within 16 blocks of it at any point during the day, and finally, villagers are no longer able to share a workstation. Previously, it was possible that multiple villagers would treat a single workstation as their own. This was both useful and problematic depending on the situation, but now it will no longer happen. The villagers' role in spawning iron golems has also changed very slightly. They no longer require their workstations, or even a profession at all, in order to generate golems. Any existing iron golem farm designs working in 1.15 should still work fine, but any future builds won't need those profession blocks included. There are a few other minor but noteworthy changes to existing mobs. The Illager patrols will no longer spawn when the player is close to an intact village, so we shouldn't be placed in difficult situations trying to avoid raids while at our villages anymore. Mobs that can be damaged by the withering effect can no longer spawn inside of the wither rows. This does mean that they can't be used for extremely simple mob farming anymore, but it also means that you can make wither skeleton farms that prevent any other kind of mob spawning at all. Mobs in general will also now avoid magma blocks and campfires, so they won't be burning themselves to death quite as often. Fish now have their own mob cap. Previously this was shared with both squid and dolphins, so now we should be seeing a bit more of all of those things. Endermen can no longer pick up netherrack, though they can pick up nylium, roots, and fungi from the new nether forest biomes. Ghast noises now have a shorter range, so you shouldn't be hearing distorted cat cries from across the entire world. And I think that pretty much does it for the general mob changes. So let's move on to Redstone. Redstone is an interesting one in this update, but before we dive into the more nuanced changes, let's first talk about the one new Redstone block. That is the target block. As you may guess, this is a target that you launch projectiles at. The closer to the center you hit, the stronger the redstone signal the block will output, up to 15 for a perfect bullseye. This works with any projectile, whether that's arrows, snowballs, ender pearls, tridents, even llama spit. Strangely, arrows and tridents will make it emit a signal for 4 redstone ticks, while the other projectiles will cause a signal for 10 ticks. It also has the fairly unique trait that it will redirect redstone dust, meaning any neighboring lines will point into the block and it will transmit that power. For most people that isn't really a big deal, but if you work on compact redstone contraptions, this could be quite handy. This block is pretty straightforward, so that's about all there is to it. It breaks a little faster with a hoe, if you need to break a lot of them for some reason, and the recipe to craft them is a hay bale in the center of a crafting grid with redstone dust on each side. Now on to some of the more general changes to redstone, of which there were quite a few as there was a push to make redstone a bit more consistent and understandable. Now those are pretty scary words for the more technical players, and indeed there has been some turbulence with these changes, but they're not too bad. The main idea behind these changes is that when it comes to redstone dust, blocks should be powered if a line connects to them directly, and not powered if it doesn't. First off, the redstone dot that you get when placing down a single piece of redstone was changed back to a cross shape, as it had previously been many years ago, and has always been on bedrock. This was done to make it clear that it is powering the surrounding blocks, but evidently the community was quite attached to that little redstone dot and raised quite a fuss about not being able to use it as blood splatters anymore. As a result, it was then changed to allow both. You can switch between the cross and the dot by right-clicking a single piece of redstone. While this was done for visual purposes, it does actually add a niche redstone mechanic. Since the dot doesn't power surrounding blocks, but does still power the block it's on top of, it does give us more options for how we can wire things. It's not really a big deal, but having more flexibility when compacting redstone is always helpful. I would also assume this behavior will be applied to bedrock, which has always used the cross design, but we haven't seen that as of yet. This focus on powering blocks only if they are directly connected to does have a few other implications. For example, now if a redstone line is turning and going up a block, but the signal stops one short, it will still power that block. It does this because the redstone line is technically pointing straight into the block at that point. This one will break some things. For example, a device frequently called a red coder will no longer work the same because of this. In many cases, this will be fixable, but do be aware that a lot of old contraptions may need some modifications. A wire that is on top of a block, but powered from a line that is lower, will now power anything it is pointing to in either direction. Again, following the rule that if a line has power, anything it points into will be powered. Some existing contraption designs may conflict with this change as well, though it does also open up some new possibilities at the same time. Redstone lines will also now visually redirect when going up non-solid blocks. Previously, this could be used to split off the redstone signal without redirecting it. Kind of a niche situation, but it was something that was utilized at times, and again, changing this may lead to some broken contraptions. I have also seen some confusion about this change in particular. This does not change how redstone lines can staircase up transparent blocks, nor that the signal cannot go down. That still is the case. It wasn't only redstone dust that had some changes, pistons and dispensers had some minor tweaks as well. Blocks placed on the backside of pistons will no longer break off when the piston retracts. This means that you could place redstone dust or rails across the top of downward-facing pistons in order to power them, or place something like a button directly onto a piston. Note that this does not apply to the sides of pistons, only the back. Pistons will now also break faster with pickaxes and slower without them, just a little side note. Dispensers also got an upgrade, which allows them to automate more simple tasks. They can equip saddles on anything the player could, though tameable mobs do still need to be tamed first, and the same is true for horse armor on horses. They can also automatically place carpets on llamas, as well as chests on llamas, donkeys, or mules. They can even be used to shear mushrooms or snow golems. There were also a couple very specific automated systems that were deemed too rewarding for how easy they were to set up and were removed or substantially nerfed. These were the zero-tick farms and AFK fishing. For those unaware, zero-tick farms were a way to trick the game into updating certain types of plants very rapidly, leading to them growing far faster than normal, and AFK fishing was, well, fishing while you were AFK, mostly for the purpose of getting enchanted books. The trick that zero-tick farming depended on was simply removed, though the change relating to AFK fishing is a little different. Existing AFK fish farms do still work. However, they won't give you any of the treasure items like enchanted books or name tags. You will only get fish or anything from the junk loot table. The way that it determines this is by checking that you're fishing in what they call open water. What this really means is that there is a 5x4x5 area around the bobber that can't contain anything that could be used to automate the process. In fact, it can only contain water, waterlogged blocks without collision, bubble columns, lily pads, and air. And each vertical layer even has to be exclusively water-type blocks or air-type blocks. They can't even be mixed together. Due to this, there's no way for us to detect if a fish is caught while being able to fish up treasures. It can technically still be done using a timer, but at that point you're depending on luck, and it's just really not worth doing. They did make one change to the loot tables in response to this change as well, and that's that lily pads are now considered junk rather than treasure. This means you can still use an AFK fish farm to collect lily pads, keeping them moderately renewable for now. Moving on, next we have advancements. Several existing advancements were modified to include the new content, or things they were simply missing before. Those are the parrots and the bats, which now can be done with Hoglins or Striders, 2x2, which now requires breeding Hoglins and Striders, as well as donkeys and mules, which apparently weren't counted before. Monster Hunted now requires Elder Guardians, Ender Dragon, Endermite, Vex, Withers, Hoglins, Zoglins, and Piglins. Stone Age can now be triggered by obtaining Blackstone, and Serious Dedication no longer requires you to use up a diamond hoe, instead it requires you to obtain a netherite one. It does not need to be used up entirely. There were also 11 brand new advancements added, mostly relevant to the Nether of course, and those are Bullseye, to hit the bullseye of a target block from 30 plus blocks away, Hidden in the Depths, to obtain some ancient debris blocks, Cover Me in Debris, for acquiring a full set of netherite armor, Country Load Take Me Home, for using a compass on a lodestone, Who is Cutting Onions, for obtaining some crying obsidian, Not Quite 9 Lives, for fully charging a respawn anchor, This Boat Has Legs, for controlling a strider with a warped fungus on a stick, Hot Tourist Destinations, for exploring all of the nether biomes, Those Were the Days, for entering a Bastion Remnant, War Pigs, for opening a chest in a Bastion Remnant, and Oh Shiny, for distracting an aggressive piglin with a gold item while not wearing any gold armor. With that out of the way, next we have the commands and technical backend changes. This is largely a topic that is beyond the scope of this overview, just because it takes quite a long time to explain technical changes in detail, and frankly, the vast majority of players aren't going to be diving into them. I will cover some of the basic stuff that the average player may find useful, but if you would like to find out more things like commands, map making, data packs, stuff of that nature, I would highly recommend checking out Sliced Lime's YouTube channel. He does a great job of covering those aspects of the game, and often creates videos specifically covering these subjects shortly after new updates. You can find his channel in a link below. That being said, there are a few things I would like to mention. First off, there is a very helpful new command, /locate_biome. This will give you the coordinates of the nearest biome of the supplied type, and this is extremely handy if you're searching for a specific place to build or looking for the new nether biomes in general. Like the locate command, the coordinates supplied from this can also be clicked to automatically enter a teleport command as well. Just be aware this isn't always safe to do in survival. There's a couple new game rules as well. Those are /game rule forgive dead players, which controls whether angered neutral mobs stop being angry when the target player dies, and /game rule universal anger, which controls if angered neutral mobs will be angry at every nearby player or only the one who upsets them. Obviously, these are for situations like zombified piglins, who previously would go into a murderous rampage on everyone if they were angered. That now won't happen by default, but it can be configured to your liking. There were also a couple new command line options added for parents. These are disable multiplayer and disable chat. As you may imagine, these will disable the ability to connect to multiplayer and disable the ability to see and use the chat respectively. So if you're a parent with young kids that you're concerned about finding their way online, there you go. There is one other thing I feel the need to point out specifically, and that is a new tag that can be applied to item frames using commands. This tag is invisible. Any item frame that has this tag will be completely invisible, leaving only the item placed inside of the item frame visible to the players. This makes it look like those items are simply laying there or are directly connected to the wall. I cannot overstate how amazingly useful this is for detail-oriented builders. The ability to not only just set items down or clearly mount something on the wall, but also to be able to use these smaller versions of blocks and items as detail is a huge deal. Of course, with great power comes great responsibility, and liberal use of these would quickly drop frame rates of your worlds, but having this option is genuinely fantastic. Unfortunately, this can only be done via commands. There is no way to do this in survival as of yet. Mojang, we absolutely need a survival equivalent of this. If you want to utilize these invisible item frames, I will leave the command in the description for you to copy should you want to get some for yourself. So before we get to all of the smaller, more miscellaneous changes and bug fixes, there is one other major feature added to this version, though it is still in its earliest stages, and that is custom worlds. This is not a direct replacement for the previous customizable world settings, though it may eventually evolve to encompass that as well, but it's actually something much crazier. If you played with the Minecraft Infinite Snapshot, the April Fool's joke of 2020, in many ways the infinite and crazy dimensions of that version were a precursor to this change. This is the beginning of data-driven world generation, and even entirely custom separate dimensions. At its most basic, this system allows you to do things like use custom seeds for each individual dimension of your world, but going more advanced, you can make something that lets you fly to the moon. This is still very early on, but it's extremely promising for the future of player-driven content without the need to learn how to create entire mods to do it. That being said, it is fairly complicated at the moment, as everything needs to be done via JSON files, and there's really not much information to go on, largely because things are going to be changing rapidly with this system as it's iterated upon. So for most players, this doesn't have much impact right now, but it is something to watch for going forward. That being said, if you do want to play around with these options right now, there is an Export World Generation Settings button in the Edit World Settings menu, which will create a JSON file in that world's folder with the settings used to generate it. There is also an Import Settings button under the More World option section when creating a new world to load those settings back in. It's also possible to control these features via data packs, though again, the actual structure for doing so is likely to be changing frequently. Of course, you will need to actually modify these JSON files to create anything interesting, which is where things get a bit complicated, and trust me, it is quite convoluted to work with at the moment. Obviously, I can't cover all of this here, however, there are a couple example files created by a developer, as well as a basic wiki page that just lists many of the different parameters that can be used. So, if you're interested or curious or the technical type, just feel free to dive into both of those, and those will be linked in the description. Next up, let's cover some of the changes to the UI and menus. First off, before you even get to the main menu, the loading screen has been changed. This reflects an entirely new style of branding by Mojang that they released when Minecraft crossed over 200 million sales recently, which is absolutely insane. So they got some shiny new typography, their official title changed to Mojang Studios, and they also finally took a stance on the pronunciation of the company name and said that it is now officially Mojang, not Mojang. Next is the main menu, which of course was changed to showcase the new Nether features and reflect the current update, as they've done since Update Aquatic. You'll also find another new button when you go to create a new world. It is the Game Rules button, and as you may imagine, this allows you to change all of the game rules for your world before generating it. It also conveys them in plain English, so it's easy to understand what you're enabling or disabling, so you can quite easily configure your world ahead of time. There is a new level to the graphics setting, one step above fancy, and that is fabulous. This one still seems to be a bit experimental, but the main reason for it is to enable some somewhat performance-intensive things like affecting how transparency works in the game. There's also a new option under your video settings called Entity Distance, and this is a scale that determines how far away entities will load for you. 100% is the default we're used to. It can be lowered down to 50%, so half the distance, or cranked up to 500%, or 5 times the difference. This will obviously affect performance, so do keep that in mind. The setting alone will also not change how mobs are rendered on servers either, though there is a new server property, Entity Broadcast Range Percentage, which does the same thing, but server side. There were a few changes to the UI that you'll be seeing in-game as well. There is now a shortcut for switching between game modes, so long as you have the necessary permissions to do so, of course. By holding down F3 and pressing F4, you will open up a new panel that allows you to cycle between all of the game modes very quickly. Also, there is a new bit of debug information given when you press F3 to give more information on mob spawning. Here's what each of those values stands for. SC stands for spawnable chunks, though this never seems to change. M is for monsters, C is for creatures, as in passive mobs, A is for ambient, so that's things like bats, and the two W's are both for water. The first one is for dolphins and squid, the second one seems to be for fish, and then finally M is miscellaneous. Speaking of miscellaneous, some miscellaneous changes to blocks. Several existing blocks that are related to the Nether have had their sounds updated. This includes blocks like netherrack, nether bricks, and bone blocks. Lava now pushes entities, so it can be used to move mobs around. Kelp can now be bone mealed. Bells can now be hung from non-full blocks, meaning they can hang from things like fences, iron bars, chains, hoppers, most blocks that are solid and will visually connect. Bells can also now be rang using any projectile. If a campfire has food on it and it gets extinguished, that food will now pop off. However, you can instead now place food onto unlit campfires directly. Blocks that get lit on fire can now be lit by any type of burning projectile. This means things like campfires can be lit by shooting them with a flame bow, or TNT can be lit by fireballs of a blaze. And soul sand and full block snow layers have now been updated to allow more blocks to be placed on them. This includes things like doors, rails, buttons, torches, pressure plates, and redstone. And just a few more random changes, the default settings for the new Forgive Dead Players and Universal Anger game rules means that angered neutral mobs, like zombified piglins or wolves, will now only attack the entity who angered them and stop being angry after that entity dies. As mentioned earlier, this can be changed if you prefer. Region files are now accessed in a way that should make world corruption and data loss less likely in the event of a crash. The compass and clock inside of the recipe book will now always have the default position instead of acting as a free version of both of those items. Shipwrecks should be less common across your oceans. Having the fire resistance effect allows you to see slightly better under lava, just a couple blocks further. And there's a couple new death messages. There's a new death message for being killed by firework rockets shot from a crossbow, as well as one for being killed by a wither skull. A quick note, I finally move on to our final section, bug fixes. As always, there was quite a large number of them, well over 400 on Java alone, but of course most of them aren't things you'll notice too often. I'm just going to point out some of the more noteworthy ones here. Grass and mycelium can once again be turned to dirt by leaving it underwater. I believe this has been broken since 1.13, but water is once again the best way to convert large areas of grass or mycelium to something else. Concrete powder and anvils now emit properly colored particles if left floating. Previously they were just solid black. This is really cool, but Mojang seems to have forgotten that they still haven't given us a proper way to make these blocks float. Entities going through the end portal will once again regenerate the Obsidian platform. In recent versions, this only happened when a player went through the portal, which removed the possibility for using it as a high-efficiency Obsidian farm, as we did in the past, but this is now possible once again. A bug causing mobs to prefer to pathfind to the northwest was fixed. This should help prevent mobs from clumping together in specific places for no reason. Wearing mending equipment that has full durability should no longer redirect XP away from repairing other mending equipment. You can now use a lead on skeleton horses, and technically zombie horses, though we still don't have proper access to those. When a villager is converted to a witch by being hit with lightning, that witch will no longer despawn. There's nothing else different, you still can't convert them back. This is just so you know that your villagers were converted. Dolphins no longer move at supersonic speed when near a player in a boat. The Elytra no longer overwrites the levitation effect. Now you won't be able to activate your Elytra until the effect ends. And city chests would occasionally be broken when they generated. This should no longer be the case. And you're now less likely to be kicked from servers for quote-unquote flying while trying to enter a bed while moving. So we are very close to being done, but there is one set of changes coming in the future I would like to mention. This is not happening in 1.16, but in a future update, certain high-efficiency farms are likely to be changing. Most notably will be gold farms, as the bug that makes zombified piglins act like a player killed them anytime they die while angry will be fixed. They will still drop gold nuggets, but no ingots nor XP unless you make a farm where you kill them directly. There will also be a change to mob spawning inside of nether fortresses. Due to a change relating to customized world generation, spawning within nether fortresses was changed to only occur within the actual physical space of the fortress itself, not the larger bounding boxes that extend beyond it. A temporary workaround was put in place for 1.16, but this will be going away in the future, so any nether fortress-based farms will need to be built with a much smaller footprint. Again, these changes will not affect 1.16, but they are slated to happen in a future update, so keep them in mind while designing and building your farms. Also, I've seen a lot of people harassing developers over these changes, as well as things like the AFK fish farm nerf, and also some of the content creators were stirring up drama over these for views, so please don't take part in that. These changes are pretty easy for the community to overcome, and they certainly aren't worth some of the anger that I've seen those developers get from certain parts of the community. And one final side note, if you're playing on a world that has been around for a while and you want to know how to easily clean up your map so it's easier to find new terrain, I have made a guide on the most effective way to do that as well. That will be linked in the top right and in the description if you are interested. And with that, we are finally done. That should be everything you need to know about Minecraft 1.16, the Nether update, when it reaches your worlds and servers in the near future. We're close enough that there shouldn't be any major changes before then, but if there are, I will add them to the description and a pinned comment, so be sure to double check for those before you go. If you would like to have a text version of this entire overview, you'll find a link to that in the description below, as well as a link to the full changelog for the entire update. As always, if you have any questions about the update, feel free to leave them below, and I'll do my best to help you out. That's all I've got for now, so hopefully this monstrosity of an overview was helpful to you. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.